Thank you, Greg. If you rent your apartment, you might think you'd be rich if you could own your apartment. If your children are in public school, maybe you think you'd be rich if you could send them to private school. Now, if you own your apartment, you might think that you won't actually be rich until you own a place out of town too, one for weekends and summers. And if you do own a place out of town, maybe you don't think of yourself as rich because, well, it's just a cottage or it's in a town that doesn't get mentioned in the style section. But if you do own a house in one of those towns, maybe you think the actual rich people are the ones that have the views or that are right on the beach. And if you have the big house that's right on the beach that has all the views that everybody wants to see and nobody can see you, maybe you don't think of yourself as rich because I'm not exactly sure, this goes beyond my imagination. But at this point, there's a connection to reality that feels somewhat tenuous, but still, maybe you're not rich because you don't have a private staff, or maybe because you drive or you take the train rather than a helicopter. Those are the rich people. Sociologist Rachel Sherman is an expert on what people think about being rich. In her book, Uneasy Street: The Anxieties of Affluence, she explores Americans' perceptions about wealth, how to get it, what you do with it, and both the merit and the morality of it. In 2017, she authored a short opinion piece entitled "What the Rich Won't Tell You," that is a handy and also a short summary of her larger body of work. In that article, Dr. Sherman demonstrates how, quote, the stigma of wealth showed up in her interviews. It showed up once when she used the word affluent in an email to a stay-at-home mom with a $2.5 million household income. This stay-at-home mom had a house in the Hamptons, a child in the private schools, and she almost canceled the interview just because Dr. Sherman had used the word affluent. This mother said, real affluence belonged to her friends who take a private plane. Many of those interviewed described affluence as never having to worry about money, which for many of those interviewed was beyond their reach because so many work for their money. Money and jobs are thus impermanent, flexible. The fear is something real. It is something like Goldman Sachs one day, out of work and jobless the next. Here, the anxiety is the anxiety of the working class that those actual rich people never have to endure. It doesn't matter how much money you make today, tomorrow you might not make any of it. Churches composed of people have similar anxieties. If your church is meeting in someone's living room, maybe you'll be a rich church when you can afford a storefront. Meeting in a storefront, maybe it's a capital campaign that's going to make you rich enough to build a building that looks more like a church. Meeting in a church, maybe, well, we're not rich like those that have millions in the bank, large endowments. And those that are sustainably using their endowments to support their ministries, well, you're not as rich as those churches that have rich people attending. And then, of course, however well-funded and stable your church may be, well, maybe you'll never be as rich as those big, old churches, the ones from way back when that happen to own a lot of land on which modern cities are built. No matter how rich your church may be, you'll never be as rich as Collegiate. Collegiate Church of the City of New York, founded in 1628 with an endowment nearly as old and where money was given for ministry based on the number of living members, not given by members in support of living ministry. The Collegiate Church, those in church think those are the really rich people. That's the rich church. And even then, within collegiate, you can hear both the defense and the longing. Well, we're not Trinity. Trinity, that's the rich church. And just like the anxiety of the Goldman Sachs executive who worries about her job and thus her life, stability. There's anxiety in church systems about money too. Are we drawing from the endowment at a sustainable rate? What we really need is a pledge drive. Maybe we'll feel more secure if we're, you can pick your side here, more connected with other churches and denominations, or less connected with other churches and the denomination. Maybe we'll be more secure when we find the new right tenant, or we're going to start a preschool, or we're going to sell the pastor's house. We aren't as rich as we used to be, and maybe we're not as rich as we want to be. But if Rachel Sherman's research shows us anything, it's unlikely that we'd be able to tell one way or the other anyway. You see, as a whole, humans, and thus the church, we aren't great with money. Sure, some of us are better at managing it than others of us are. Those that are tend to get jobs that pay more of it. Some of us care less about it than what we perceive others care about it. Some of us are better at saving for a rainy day. Some of our churches are great at only taking a sustainable endowment draw of less than 5%. Some of our churches have robust lay stewardship committees that do pledge drives like clockwork and know that it's always stewardship season. Some of our churches aren't. Some of us aren't. Together, we have a disparate and a complicated relationship with money. Collectively, for sure. Individually, perhaps. As a church, no doubt. And among the faithful, there is a received wisdom that does a nice job cherry-picking one phrase from all the other phrases Greg read from the book of 1 Timothy this morning. You know what this is. I'm betting that if you're at least as old as I am or said half as many things as I've said over the course of my big-mouthed long life, you've probably said the phrase yourself. You might have told your kids. Maybe you cautioned your spouse. Maybe you've said it at a board meeting for a nonprofit that you support. Maybe you've told a pastor or reasoned through it with some fellow disciples in an adult education class. Feel free to say it with me. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. You can see it quilted on throw pillows. It's everywhere. This phrase, we love to say it. I'm going to make an even further bet with you, and I'm going to suggest that you, like me, may have misquoted it. Wandering around, pious in our relative poverty, for none of us are those rich people. We probably like to remember this quote as, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil," right? We remember this. Doesn't that sound right? We use the before root, and we make the love of money the singular root of all kinds of evil. The Greek, however, doesn't, nor does the English translation that we actually read from. The love of money is a root of all kind of evil, not the, which means that it's even trickier than we first thought. It means that there might be co-conspirators with the love of money that can get us into all sorts of trouble that money alone can't. Think with me, what could they be? Putting oneself above others, the lack of humility, isolation, failing to help when help is required, failing to even notice where help is required. These are but a few of what comes to mind first. Now, often this text is used to further oppress those who live in poverty, those who are quite literally fiscally poor. In our quest for moral superiority, poverty often gets glamorized by people who don't live in it. We give an elegy to the hillbilly. We think of, that's simple life. Some religious professional takes vows of poverty. Many more live in a world that thinks they should. Wealth in the church, like wealth just about anywhere, does indeed often lead to problems. The love of money is certainly a root of some of the evils perpetuated by religious leaders, and the love of money is certainly a root of some of the circumstances even we here at Collegiate now find ourselves in. The megachurch pastor who earns millions of dollars, or the congregation, as reported a couple weeks ago, that needs to buy a private plane to move that pastor around. Where is he going? Or the congregations that look more like the 700 Club, or the all too hilarious but all too real fictionalization of HBO's The Righteous Gemstones. These are all good case studies for how the love of money in the church can go so wrong. Selling historic buildings in order to build luxury condos. Buying strip malls and storage units in states across the Northeast, claiming it's building the endowment portfolio. Golden parachutes for church executives to stop doing their job that far exceed the rest of the staff's salaries to do their jobs harder. These are others, closer to home, closer to collegiate examples. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is a big problem for those rich people. At least we're not those rich people. The big problem of us meritocracy, hard-working Protestants face is not the love of money, but rather the ignorance of it. We don't like to talk about it. In polite society, no talk about money, politics, or religion. You all know this, I know this. In church, no talk about money or politics, but only about religion. Money, politics, and religion, three hotbeds that tell us and others more about ourselves than most of us care to own any given day. I think they have more to do with each other than meets the eye. If the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, I'd suggest that the love of politics is also a root of all kinds of evil. I'll also suggest that the love of religion is a root of all kinds of evil. Crusades, holy wars, jihads, cults, mega examples, but there are minor ones too. Now, this doesn't mean you can't love your church or love watching CNN or even love payday, but it does mean we should be cautious. Cautious against any love that threatens to separate us from the love of God. Any love that threatens to become an idol. If you need scriptural precedent for how money, politics, and religion come together as a root for all kinds of evil, think back to that story of the golden calf, an idol made from money, about tribal politics, meant as religion. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and we thus think we shouldn't talk about it. Don't talk about it. But the truth is, we probably need to talk about money more, not less. We, as people of faith, we need to talk about the wage gap between men and women. We need to talk about the inadequacies of our social safety net, of a living wage rather than a minimum one, and about how expensive it is to age with dignity. We need to talk about taxation, which is tricky as it's both money and politics. We need to talk about money here at West End, which is tricky as it's both money and religion. Judging from the sociologists' studies, there are few people and thus few organizations that think of themselves as wealthy, which is to say that most people and most organizations have at least some inkling that they either want or actually need more money. Our church is no exception here. Maybe you aren't either. Maybe you're one of the millions of workers out there right now looking for a new post-pandemic job with a new post-pandemic salary. Maybe you're one of the multitude of people living on fixed incomes in the age of extraordinary inflation, wondering, how is this going to work? Maybe you're one of the millions of students or graduates that are counting on student debt relief. Or maybe you're feeling totally fine. Maybe you have the good strength of self to know that you're richer than you think, and you come to this church which is both richer than we think, and yet not as rich as we think. Now, you all know that here at West End Church, we are in a period of transition and transformation. With zero support from the Collegiate Church Endowment, each of our 4 collegiate churches are looking to fill the gaps this year and for many years to come. We here at West End, as you all know, we are looking for a new school partner, a tenant, really, a tenant to whom we will rent a big portion of our building so that we, the congregation, can keep using our building. That process is ongoing, but our experts remain optimistic. A new tenant, however, will be no more a magic salve than the Collegiate Church Endowment was before, for the love of easy money is a root of all kinds of evil. Bottom line, we all need to be supporting our church more. If we're going to be a vibrant congregation, then the living ministry of West End Church needs to be supported by the living members of West End Church. All of us. We are in the midst of getting our financial house, our church, in order, and there is a lot more work in front of us. Over the years, we have been quite comfortable here in all sorts of ways, from who fixes the leaky ceiling to who pays the capital expenses, or how big our staff can be, or how many musicians we can afford to pay each Sunday. All of these expenses are shifting to us, friends, us. Those of you who are sitting here, those of you who are sitting at home, they're coming right at us. We have to get serious about talking about money if we're going to remain seriously talking about our faith. We are no longer looking to those rich people over at Collegiate or those rich people downtown or in the downtown office for our future. We are now talking about how we rich people here at West End, need to make our own future. We rich people. Which is not to say that we all have the same bank accounts, we don't. That we all own our apartments, we don't. Or that we all have houses out of town, we don't. Or that we all don't worry about where our next meal is coming from, we don't. Or that we don't have enough to share. Some of us do. Some of us will build this future with our financial riches. Some of us will build this future with the richness of our expertise. We'll lead programs. We'll teach classes. We will give our talents, which have a richness beyond compare. Some of us will build this new future in the now volunteer choir, giving time each week for rehearsals and fellowships, as we've heard so many of you want. As together we give and lead worship together. Some of us will build this future by serving on task force and consistory, giving so much time and expertise. And some of us are going to build this church by volunteering today, right after worship even, by coming and talking to me. Some of us are going to build this church by volunteering to being on the stewardship committee and leading a pledge drive. Some of us are here right now ready to do that. And in faith, we are so very, very rich. In talent, we are so very, very rich. In finance, grimace as I do as I say this, and as I can see it in your eyes as you anticipate me saying it, in finance, we're rich too. Together, we are the inheritors of the realm of God, which is to say that each of us are heirs and heiresses of the greatest treasure of all. In faith, you are called. By grace, you are blessed. By love, you are saved. May every grace upon grace be upon you as is promised. I have come to give you life and life abundant, Jesus promises. What richness is this? The richness of all of us.